Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. There's been quite a lot of movement and excitement around PrEP, and Jill was happy to jump in and tell us a little bit more about the recent developments. So we're very happy to have her today. And we all know Jill very well, but I'll still give a proper bio for her. So Dr. Jill Blumenthal, MD, MAS, is a professor of medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases and Global Public Health at the University of California, San Diego. She received her medical degree from Weill Cornell Medical College, completed her internal medicine residency at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Weill Cornell, and her infectious diseases fellowship at UC San Diego, where she also earned a Master's of Advanced Studies in Clinical Research. Her research focuses on HIV prevention, particularly pre-exposure prophylaxis, implementation across diverse populations, and on integrating gender-affirming care into HIV services. She's also the proud partner of Sean, two beautiful children, Billy and Noah, and fur baby Tallulah. That was Marvin's creation.
That was lovely and surprising. Thank you. Because we always say thank you so much for that kind introduction that often we have generated ourselves, but that was a add-in. So I appreciate that, Anik. I'm really happy to be here, everyone. I've been sort of sporadically here these last 8 months with caring for some new members of our family who you'll see at the end. This is not meant to be any kind of branded talk, but this is clearly, mostly about one medical product today. But I think it's so important to understand where we are with Lenacapavir, because it is such a incredible new development. And I think there are a lot of questions about what it's going to look like in practice, which is where I want to head to at the end. So anyway, I apologize that this is, mostly about one agent. And I will, you will see that I have some disclosures. I really just want to know I want everyone to know where this all came from. I'm not sure we ever really went over some of the data in high rounds about Purpose 1 and Purpose 2, which is how we got here. So after background, we'll talk about those two studies. And then I want to talk about some additional purpose studies that we at the AVRC have been involved in, and then a little bit on some LAI studies that are coming your way here in San Diego. And I may have missed some, so it'll be an opportunity for others to say, that there's something they're working on. I have very little on the Owen Clinic early experience with Lenacapavir or Yeztugo, but there are people on the call that are going to jump in. And then I wanted to talk about injection because it's a very hot topic. I know at least at our clinic, there's been a lot of buzz around that. So want to go from the science into real world today. So we'll move into background. So I think a lot of what's on here, this group is not a stranger to this information. Looking at the graph on the left, we still are seeing about 1.3 new HIV diagnoses globally. Oral PrEP use is well below the UNAIDS target, which is supposed to be around 10 million. We're somewhere, around 1.6 million. There are huge disparities in PrEP usage in the United States. Why does that occur? Looking at the graphic on the right, there are a lot of barriers to PrEP uptake, stigma, discrimination, distrust. I think that sort of hovers over everything that we do in the HIV treatment and prevention world, and should not be given short shrift here. But then, of course, there are other things, and I want to highlight number 4, which is that the current PrEP modalities don't necessarily meet all individual needs. And that's what's been really exciting since the approval of cabotegravir in 2021, that we have other ways to give PrEP. And obviously, there's still other things, other modalities that are being looked at. And how will we overcome these barriers? We need science. We always need science, innovative therapies that meet different people's needs. But of course, health equity is really important. I'm not going to spend that much time talking about that today. I think we do a really good job talking about that here on High Rounds. But I do want to highlight that for the purpose studies, that's definitely been a focus of some of the work is basically trying to expand, well, first the studies being including a diverse group of people in them, but then also making sure all the information is sort of passed around to different groups of people and focusing on linking people to services that have good that are that wrap around, and then making sure that we have a good knowledgeable providers that can offer. I thought this was a nice slide because again, I don't think this is news to anyone, but this was from a presentation that I'm sorry. I'm just trying to move something here. That Jeannie Marazzo gave at CROI in 2023, which looked at 11 demonstration projects with pooled data, looking at objective versus subjective adherence. And this is not news to anyone in this group, but I think really highlights, the difference between what people are actually doing, and the red is someone taking less than 2 tablets a week versus what they say they're doing, which is, more on the order of more than 4 tablets a week. And we've seen this across studies. And then again, not surprisingly, when you offer people without HIV person-centered choices, you generate much higher PrEP coverage. So just offering people sort of standard of care PrEP, which in a lot of places in the world is FTC TDF. You do a lot better as far as coverage goes when you offer person-centered choices. I mean, I look at that study and I sort of say, well, duh. But it's nice to see it. And then now that we have those choices, we'll see how this plays out. We've definitely talked about lenacapavir or Len. It's a really exciting drug that we're using in both HIV treatment. Right now, primarily for people who, are experienced, but we'll definitely be seeing it for people who are naive as well. So why Len is so exciting, multiple reasons. It targets multiple stages of the HIV replication cycle. It's highly potent. There's no overlapping resistance with other ARV agents. So, if resistance was to develop and someone needed to be put on an HIV regimen, there would be no issue putting them on anything that's currently approved for HIV treatment. It has a very well characterized PK and a long half-life, which allows it to be which allows for flexible dosing profile, both oral and injectable, and obviously long periods of time. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about purpose 1, which was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2024, and we probably discussed this briefly at one point, but I just wanted to go through it again in case you've forgotten how we got here. So it was a study in Africa of over 5,000 individuals, cisgender women, young cohort 16 to 25 years, not on PrEP, and no HIV testing in the past 3 months. There were 3 arms. And so you had an active lenacapavir arm versus placebo, an active FTAF oral daily arm, and we'll talk a little bit about that because that was another goal of this study, was to look at how FTAF performed in cisgender women or women assigned or people assigned female at birth, excuse me, having vaginal sex. And then a third arm of FTC TDF daily. And it was a 2-to-1 randomization, as you can see, over 2,000 in the Len arm, over 2,000 in the FTAF, and then the active control arm was a little bit over 1,000 people. And the primary analysis was against the background HIV infection, but the secondary analyses, and we'll talk about those, were also against FTDF. And for those, sorry, the background HIV incidence is the incidence that would be expected without PrEP, that would have been expected in a placebo group. It's one of the reasons why the study criteria include no HIV testing in the past 3 months, with the idea that you could screen people who might not have had that testing, and then you would be able to obtain a background HIV incidence. I'm going to talk about the patient characteristics. I'm going to compare them to Purpose 2, so you'll see those at the end. So I'm just getting right into the results here. So the background HIV incidence rate was 2.4, and I mean, I still get chills when I look at this slide. There were 0 infections in the Len arm, 0. I don't believe there's been. Actually, I should say, I don't believe there has not been an HIV prevention study with any findings like this. So it should make everyone just, take pause. This is wonderful. So 0 infections in the Len cohort, and then 39 cases in the FTAF arm, and then 16 cases in the FTDF. And I want to remind people this was 2 to 1. And we'll talk about we'll talk about whether there were statistical differences between FTAF and FTDF in a little bit, but I really wanted to highlight this 0 Len finding. Again, the very hot topic that has been coming up is the injection site reactions and what happened in this study. The predominant, there were a lot of things that were followed in this study. Nodule pain, swelling, and erythema were the main ones discussed here because these were the most commonly cited. The nodule pain and swelling were discussed. And I just want to remind everyone that Len is injected into the subcutaneous space. It forms a drug depot, and it can be palpable under the skin, but usually not visible. And that is often what people feel is the nodule. And as the drug elutes over time, the depot gets smaller, the nodules may resolve entirely or reduce in size. So that is some of the experience of that nodule. And what is, really nice to see here is that the frequency of ISRs, including nodules, decreased with subsequent doses. So you can see that over time, but there definitely are nodules, and it is something that has to be discussed with patients. That's something that they may experience. Pain and swelling does seem to improve over time, although, not much swelling reported here. So this was a poster just from CROI 2025. It's pretty busy, so let me take you through the what's really important here. This was really looking at the FTAF and cisgender women, because again, there was some hope that there'd be the ability to show that FTAF was also safe and effective. So again, we talked about these numbers, and I think the most important thing to look at is, the data on 37 people who acquired HIV, and for adherence, nearly, I think that's a little over 90% of people were found to have less than 2 doses per week as far as drug level or equivalent to drug levels, and match controls much higher levels. Again, speaking to the fact that this can work, but if people aren't taking it, it makes it really difficult to know, how well it can work. And then there were 2 people that acquired HIV resistance mutation. One had many resistance mutations, suggesting that it was, due to transmitted drug resistance. And one who had declining adherence did have the one M184 mutation. So basically the conclusion here was that it was effective for PrEP in cisgender women who took it consistently, which has been the message for many years with oral PrEP, but less, and as we've said before, not as much forgiveness as some other groups. And the emergence of antiretroviral resistance was rare. Now, I was hopeful that this was going to be enough to get FDA approval for FTC TAF in cisgender women. I don't believe that has occurred yet, and I don't know where they are with that. But I think with providers where you have cisgender women or individuals assigned female at birth who for some reason the FTC TDF isn't working for them, it's often a pill size issue. I think this is a very reasonable alternative, and I hope that we'll see approval soon, but can't speak to that. So the major Purpose 1 trial conclusions was that 0 women, 0, who received Len-acquired HIV, and it reduced incident HIV compared with background HIV, and with daily oral FTDF. I'll show that on a slide later. Adherence to the oral regimens was poor, but that protection was strongly associated with FTAF adherence. They were all relatively well tolerated, and you did have Len ISRs. Most were grade 1 or grade 2, and those did decline over time. I didn't get into this much here, but the pregnancy outcomes were similar to those expected for the population, nothing concerning. And then all trial participants are being offered open label Len. I still believe that's going on. And obviously, this study creates a path forward for other PrEP options or HIV vaccine trials. Does anyone have any questions? You know what? I'll do the purpose studies, and then we can see if there are any questions. So Purpose 2, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge our amazing staff here at the AVRC who got to be a site for Purpose 2. We have some data on that, but it was really exciting to be part of this very intentional study where the idea was to try to enroll a cohort that was geographically, racially, ethnically, and from a gender standpoint, diverse. And it was very well achieved, which you'll see in the data that I show a little bit later. So this was cisgender, men who have sex with, gay and bisexual men who have sex with men, transgender women, transgender men, non-binary individuals. Again, no PrEP and no HIV testing in the past 3 months. Same comparison to the background HIV incidence. There were 2 arms, which was in a 2-to-1 ratio. The Len arm enrolled over 2,000 people, and the FTC TDF oral daily arm was over 1,000. Some people ask why FTC TAF wasn't used. Many of the sites that were involved in the study, and there were several international sites, didn't have that FTAF available. So this was what was chosen, which was somewhat interesting in trying to enroll people in this study. And if there's time, we can talk a little bit about it, because it certainly was a more challenging study to enroll people because of the no PrEP or HIV testing in the last 3 months. And perhaps if you'd ever been on PrEP, if you're someone who'd already been on FTAF, you were potentially going to be going to FTDF. So anyway, we can, if there's time, we can talk about that a little bit more. And again, the primary endpoint was Len versus the background HIV, but then also comparisons of Len versus FTDF. Okay, so this is where I wanted to compare the 2 studies. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I think this popped up earlier than it meant to. This is when, so I'm going to come back to this. I apologize. So I just wanted to go into the findings similar to Purpose 1. You get similar chills, maybe not exactly the same way, but 2 cases in over 2,000 individuals in the Len arm, giving an HIV incidence rate of 0.10 compared to the background HIV incidence rate of 2.37. And then you can see the FTDF, which had 9 cases. So again, fabulous data. And, the way that translates is Len reduced incident HIV by 96% compared with background HIV incidence. The primary endpoint was more than met. Again, we'll talk a little bit about injection site reactions, and I'm going to compare the two studies. Here, nodule pain and erythema were the more dominant symptoms, or the dominant AEs that were reported. Probably not surprising, the Purpose 1 study was nearly 100% Black women, African women, where erythema might not be as evident. So this is what was seen more. Definitely some, nodule reports, which declined over time. And what happened in this study, and then I think in Purpose 1, was that injection technique was honed over time and started to be used in this study. So, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about injection, but basically using ice or cold compress before and after the injection may have helped with some of the experiences of the ISRs over time. But there was definitely a decline in it. I do just have the recollection at the beginning of the study, there were a lot of people where this was very new for them, and they were surprised at how significant it felt, how much pain they experienced. But I think we got better over time at giving these injections. Oh, and just so among the over 3,000 participants, 29 discontinued due to AEs of ISRs. That obviously does include people who were lost to follow-up. And I suspect that some of them may have disappeared because they may not have tolerated it. Again, I think it's gotten a lot better, but I do want to highlight that. So the Purpose 2 trial conclusions: 2 participants acquired it among over 2,000 participants. And again, Len reduced HIV incidence by 96%, and by 89% compared with daily oral FTC TDF. Both were well tolerated. No difference in the incidence of the most common non-ISR AEs, which I didn't show here, but sort of the standard, headache, fatigue, nausea that we see was the same across the 2 arms. But it was, and not surprisingly, there was a decline in EGFR in the FTC TDF group, which we've seen in every study. And that ISRs were common for Len. Again, most were grade 1 or 2, and that the incidence and severity decreased over time. This combined with Purpose 1, obviously very robust. And all trial participants are currently being offered open label Len, and we'll talk about that at our site, what that looks like. Okay, yeah, so I must have shown it twice. So now I want to compare the trials a little bit, and I want to just start by showing the baseline characteristics. So you have a very young cohort in Purpose 1. I mean, they only enrolled 16 to 25-year-olds. For Purpose 2, it was still a relatively young cohort with a median age of 28, 29, but you can see there's a much bigger range. 100% are Black in Purpose 1, and non-white for Purpose 2, 2/3 of the participants. Big difference here, right? Any prior HIV testing. Oh, sorry, no, they just flipped the way that looked. So it's actually about the same, the prior HIV testing. I did want to highlight, any use of PrEP in Purpose 1, it was very low. And in Purpose 2, remember, it had to be more than 3 months. It was higher, more on the order of a quarter had used PrEP. It was a sexually active group, by looking at the STI incidence, although both relatively low rates of syphilis and just wanted to highlight that. And you have a pretty relatively single group of cisgender women, few that were married or living with a primary partner, and then compared to cisgender or gender identity, and just wanted to highlight that over 20% were people who had gender diverse expressions. And I just wanted to highlight this here because this was one of the ways that you could be one of the screening criteria were self-report or was sort of a party and play reported use of stimulants. And this was a group where that was, pretty heavily used, but overall balanced across the randomized groups. And then wanted to show what this looked like side by side for purpose one. Clearly Len is favored. And this is where the comparison of FTAF to TDF comes up. And just to highlight that FTAF was not different from the background HIV incidence. Again, highlighting the fact that FTAF could work if taken well. And then in purpose two, clearly Len favored. Just wanted to show these side by side. And I think I like showing this because this just lets me highlight that women are tough and maybe men aren't as tough, which was seen across these studies. So there was a lot more nodule and pain reported compared to purpose one from these studies. Now, I think it probably has a lot to do with body habitus and experience, as far as childbearing goes. But people who were involved in both studies definitely made that comment. And I think we've seen these in other studies where you compare sorry, I'm saying very broadly, that maybe sometimes men experience things differently than women do. And this was very seen, this was seen in the study. I see that Lisa asked,
Yeah.
Yeah, I see the question. Yeah, I thought I explained that the background HIV incidence is what would be expected if PrEP weren't used. So the way that was calculated in both of these studies were people who were screened in the study who hadn't had HIV testing in the last 3 months. They just looked at the HIV. It was just the number of HIV infections that were present at baseline. And so it was basically what it would look like. Yes, sort of the prevalence. But really the incidence. So the incidence of HIV infections essentially in a 3 months time because you're asking people not to have tested in the last 3 months. Sure, no problem. So I wanted to show what was happening now for purpose one and purpose two, because we're involved in this. So there's now a Len open extension label phase, which all participants who were still in the study were offered. And oops, I'm sorry about that. And so it's 52 weeks or until the sponsor says, I mean, the way that this was stated was 52 weeks or until approval occurs or the sponsor wants to stop it. Right now it's still going. And I just wanted to show our data here, which I'm allowed to do because this is a published study. We obviously were referred a lot of people and we don't have those numbers. Thanks, Terrence. For Terrence Hendricks for getting these. We screened 24 people. We had 2 screen fails, enrolled 22 individuals. We had a handful of people who were lost to follow-up. People who moved out of the area actually wanted to stay in the study, and it got complicated. We tried to link them to other sites. It didn't work. Unfortunately, we did have a patient who died during the study. It had nothing to do with the study drug. And it was actually something that we probably picked up on labs that allowed her to start getting treatment. But unfortunately, she passed away. And then we have, so with all of that, we now have 9 active participants, 7 opted to stay in the Len open label extension phase. I do want to share one anecdote right now. because there were a couple of people who had been in care in at Owen on PrEP in the past who were referred for the study, and one of them is a patient of mine, and he had the experience where he described receiving the injections as 5 minutes of bees stinging one spot on his body, like one of the most intense feelings he's ever had. Obviously, was certain that he was in the Len arm. He was not in the Len arm. He was in the placebo arm. And I just want to make the point that anytime something is injected into your body without any real preparation, without icing or good technique, it can be painful. So it was just very interesting. It was normal saline, Dave. So yes, and
No,
bees.
Jill.
Yeah, not
Jill,
not a,
it wasn't NS. No, they had like a specific, it was very viscous. So I think that it was
but there was,
just,
I thought there was some saline in it. Sorry,
oh,
go
it's
ahead.
possible there was, yeah, it's possible there was saline. I can't remember exactly what the constituents of the placebo,
Yeah,
but it was a highly viscous. So when it was going in, I think it really hurt people no matter what.
yeah. No, they did a really, I mean, props to them for making the placebo very similar to the point where one part, I mean, people were very certain that they were in certain arms. Anyway, yeah. So yes, the saline, there was more saline, more than saline, but saline was present. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment on that? Because it sounds
Sure.
like a lot of hoopla is made uh, that lenacapavir, it's not so bad because look, the placebo also caused these problems. But if the placebo was basically everything, it's maybe the lenacapavir itself isn't the problem, but the vehicle is actually quite might be quite painful and problematic, I guess, for many folks.
I
So
fully agree with you, and we'll
if
talk
it,
about that because I think
yeah,
it's
if it were just
very
yeah, if it were just saline or something as a placebo, you theoretically could still answer the question about uh, whether or not efficacy, but as far as adverse effects, yeah, I wonder if you really can dis if you can discount some of the discomfort that people feel with the actual active drug by comparing it to placebo. That's
I
my
mean, I just want you to look at this, right? There were absolutely reports of nodules, pain both in the placebo, but it was well matched from that standpoint. I don't
Yeah,
know
but
if
it's not like people were getting like a fake injection. They were getting an injection with a lot of chemicals and stuff like that. And those chemicals can
sure.
be in both.
Isn't that the
So,
whole point of a placebo though, is to try to the match the
right. Okay. But
match
the
the
point of
medication as good as
the
possible.
point of interpreting the fact that there are fewer differences between placebo and active drug in this instance does not say anything about like the fact that people were just envisioning that or imagining that they had a problem in the placebo group. It's the fact that, the actual vehicle,
Yes,
maybe
I
not the
understand what
vehicle
you're
plus
saying.
drug, but the vehicle is actually,
Right.
is painful and
But
causes all
that's
these
how,
different
but that's
problems.
how people interpreted it, right? Because if it hurt, it meant that they had lenacapavir, which clearly is not what it is. It's the vehicle. I see what you're saying. Thanks, Dave. So with all this data, um, this drug was announced in Science as the 2024 Breakthrough of the Year. Um, I'm sure you had people in your lives asking you about this. This was, definitely a big deal. And then, not surprisingly, June 18th, 2025, lenacapavir, or Yeztugo, I think those are the true pronunciations I've heard, was approved. And Jeff, we should talk about that at the end if we have time. The idea of the interpretation of this as vaccine versus injection, which I think has come up a lot. I think came up with or has come up with cabotegravir as well. So we can talk about that. So it's approved. The great news is that a lot of the studies are moving forward, even with approval. And I wanted to talk about some of the additional purpose studies, and again, give some props to our to the AVRC for the amazing work that's happening here. So we're involved in both Purpose 3 and Purpose 4. Purpose 3 is 250 U.S. cisgender women finished enrollment. Study enrollment about 6 weeks ago. Purpose 4 is people who inject drugs in the United States, 180 people. Last person to enroll was about 2 weeks ago. Thanks so much, Christian. And maybe there we go. Thanks so much. So sorry, just to return to the conversation we were having, PEG 400, which was meant to be identical in viscosity. I'm sorry that I said it was just saline. There's also Purpose 5 going on in France and the UK, and it's for people who cannot access PrEP for some reason. So just wanted to show, this was the original study schema for Purpose 3. When I say original, before there was an open label, 52 weeks. This is not a blinded study. It is 1-to-1 Len versus oral FTDF. And again, if you recall what I said about enrolling people into Purpose 2, cisgender women, if they've ever had any PrEP experience, they were only used to FTC TDF. So to say you're either on the medication that you've been on or you heard about versus this other one, the cell felt a little bit easier. And then this is the Purpose 4 study schema. It's the same. I just wanted to make, well, it was different in that there was 2-to-1 enrollment for this. So 120 people in the active Len arm, and 60 in the FTC TDF. But the Len open label phase, which many participants are in now, they can either, they can stay in the PK-tail phase and be switched over to FTC TDF, or continue to receive subcutaneous Len. And again, Len has become available. There was some concern that maybe the studies would end. That's not happened. And it'll be nice to have this data on cisgender women in the United States and people who inject drugs. I can't show it, but I'm really proud of the enrollment that we did here. We met our study enrollment goals, which was about 20 individuals. So more data will come, and I'm happy to talk about those studies in the future. But it was a huge effort by a lot of people, and it was really very exciting to be part of these 3 Purpose studies. Which leads me to another exciting, and if we're going to call something a vaccine, I think this would be closest to the vaccine we can get. This is Purpose 365, which is a phase 3 single-arm study looking at the safety, tolerability, and PK data of once yearly intramuscular Len, intramuscular, not subcutaneous, in people with an indication for PrEP. So this is what it will look like. A one-time dose, and actually I'll show you what it looks like, an extension phase, and then a follow-up. There will be 30 sites, 29 in the United States, with an enrollment goal of 300. And again, I can happily say that the AVRC was selected to be one of those sites. So we will be offering this study, and Marvin Hanashiro is the study coordinator, so you can email him with any questions, or myself if you'd like. I just wanted to show briefly the study inclusion criteria. It is people of all gender identities and sex assigned at birth. But I did want to highlight that these are people who can be on PrEP, but these are the criteria that are important. They have to have receptive anal or vaginal sex in the past 6 months. And then one of the following, and I think many people will fall into the criteria of condomless, receptive sex with at least one partner of unknown HIV status. And then we have sort of the traditional STI in the last 6 months, and then a partner known to be living with HIV with an unknown or detectable viral load. So this is definitely not for people who are like, oh, I have a partner living with HIV, but everything's going fine. And the idea is to obviously follow these criteria. And then the main exclusion, besides hepatitis B and C, is what we often will highlight, because we have seen individuals with B and C. This is not going to include people who are pregnant or lactating at screening or day one. Most of these studies have allowed people to stay on if that occurs during study period. And then the most important two things is could not participate in the HIV vaccine or BNAB study or use oral or subcutaneous Len in the past 18 months. So that means they can have taken other forms of PrEP, including cabotegravir. Y'all are having some funny jokes in the chat. I like the PEG comment. And so this is just what it'll look like. It's similar, but you know, an intramuscular dose on day one, and there's still the oral loading dose, which is what occurs for lenacapavir, but just a one-time injection. And then the extension phase will occur every 52 weeks until Len becomes available or the sponsor discontinues. So again, let us know if you have someone that might fit the criteria. We're going to try to do some pre-screening. We expect the study to enroll fast and furiously, although we are going to do our best to keep with the Purpose 2 theme, which is to try to make sure that we are enrolling a diverse cohort as well as we can. Wanted to highlight a couple of studies that have been highlighted where, and I'm sorry if I didn't get them all. I finished these rather late yesterday or just getting to the end. So some studies at UCSD looking at LAI for HIV prevention, including Len. So the first is Extra Mile, Extraordinary Methods to Implement Low Barrier Care Experiences. And it's basically long-acting injectable PrEP for people who use drugs. It's a CHIRP-funded study to innovate LAI PrEP in non-traditional settings. And the plan is for Owen Clinic to provide LAI PrEP, both CAB or LEN, and other services alongside community partners who serve people who use drugs. The PI is Robert Dice, and other co-investigators include Laura Bamford, Miley Karras-Young, and Angie Bazzi. Study coordinator is Terrence Hendricks, and it sounds like the launch is planned for next month. But if anyone wants to update me on that, please let me know. I know Robert is in Mexico, so was not going to be joining today. And then I just wanted to highlight a NEEC study that has not been fully executed yet, but we're hoping everything will work out. The title is Implementing Mobile Unit Delivered Injectable Lenacapavir in Populations with Unmet HIV Prevention Needs in San Diego. It's a Gilead-funded study to determine the effectiveness of Len relative to other PrEP formulations, while also co-locating with other mobile medical and social services. And we're planning to co-locate with UCSD Mammography, Harm Reduction Coalition of San Diego, and a really cool organization that we're both excited to partner with since it's new to us, which is Showers for Humanity. And we're basically going to look at different PrEP look at PrEP uptake by formulation, and then also look at implementation considerations for mobile Len delivery. And we also are working with Nimish Patel on this. So I have very little here. So maybe this is where either Christian or Alan can unmute, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the lenacapavir for HIV prevention at the Owen Clinic. Just want to highlight, and again, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like there's somewhere between 5 and 8 individuals using lenacapavir for HIV treatment at this point. So that's Sunlenca. So
more like 15.
Okay, 15. Thank you. And these are people, Lucas, because I know some people get one injection and then they don't continue it. Are these people who are continuously receiving it?
Yeah.
Okay, so about 15. And that has been approved.
Few years, couple
Few
years.
That's what I was
couple
going to
years,
guess, but
couple
I'm
years,
sure
yeah.
someone can pop in the chat when it was actually approved. But obviously these are, people, these are treatment experienced individuals. But just to compare, this was approved June 18th. We have 50 people on the wait list for it. I know just a lot of the reasons for them to be on the wait list is that it's maybe not a high priority for them. It's something they're interested in, but it's known that it may be challenging with their insurance. And so there's not like a huge rush for them to get on it. And I think it's just people who've expressed interest in it. But there have been 10 lenacapavir starts. And there definitely has been some challenges with injection, which is why I wanted to spend a little time discussing that. There were 2 that had leakage from the injection sites, and then 1 superficial ulceration, which you can see here. And the thought from this, after talking with folks at Gilead and just from our own experience, was that this was likely not put into the subcutaneous space and went into the the dermis, and this is what can occur, unfortunately. And oftentimes it just gets better with wound care. This particular participant actually has evolved into a small abscess, and they're receiving antibiotics for it. Hopefully, as injection techniques gets better, this will occur less. And this is just from my take, and Alan, I think, said he would be happy to speak to it. As far as what's been easy, Medi-Cal has been straightforward to get approval. Certain PPOs have all been straightforward. Prep app, you can do prep app with confidentiality, similar to what occurs for cabotegravir.
No,
And the
no,
app,
you cannot.
you
Not yet.
cannot at all.
No,
Okay.
not yet.
I'm going to turn this part over to Alan if you want to speak to sort of what the
Okay.
experience has been
Okay.
like.
The prep app is saying they're going to add to the formulary within the next month. So that should change. Hopefully, in the next month we can do Len the same way that we do cabotegravir. We have been doing so prep AP uninsured. We've been doing those through patient assistance program with Gilead. We've done a couple. We have probably 5 more. So if the patient has just prep AP and it's uninsured, we can definitely do that. Look into that option. The problem with the confidentiality is that Gilead will find insurance, so we have to wait until prep AP adds that to their formulary. Medicare has changed. I was able to get an approval for one, so that one is good. Again, Medi-Cal is easy. PPOs, nothing is straightforward, I guess. Some of it is. I think one of the problems that Jill has spoke to it is that Gilead decided to charge for the tablets and the injection, and that's creating a lot of issues because you have to do 2 separate prior authorizations. And some of the plans are doing the tablets through the pharmacy benefits and the injection to the medical benefits, which makes everything confusing. So it has been a confusing process as far as coverage.
Actually, I didn't talk about that, and I think that's really important. So I think a lot of people assume that the drug is received as sort of a package with 2 injections and 4 tablets, right? 2 and 2. But it's not, it's separate. And for some individuals, there have been approval for the injection, but not for the tablets. I think all of this will get better over time. When I have conversations with patients, just letting them know that it's available. I'm certainly not saying you have to go to this drug. For some people who really they're doing fine on whatever regimen they're on, I say, why don't you wait until there's more experience or the insurance process a little bit smoother. No shortage of other options right now, but it is really nice, particularly for sorry, I just saw a comment in the chat and I'll come back to that. Actually, I lost my train of thought, so I don't know if anyone heard what I was saying. Alan, what was I saying? No.
One thing I can speak to is that on our interest list, about 10 out of the 50, about 10% are people that actually have a need for this medication, meaning they are not on any prep for some reason. Either they could not tolerate oral prep, could not tolerate Apretude. We have somebody who is on a wheelchair, so we couldn't do an injection on their butt. So all kinds of different. So about 10%, I'll say 5 people are people that are like high priority to go on this. Everybody else is probably on Apretude or the Scovy, and it's more like they just don't want to come in every 2 months, and they want to come in every 6 months. So it's like a choice.
And I also want to make the point, since I don't want to, I have no loyalty or allegiance anywhere. A lot of patients really like the idea of staying on their every 2-month regimen because it keeps them coming in very consistently. I didn't put up anything about sort of the recommended testing guidance, which is still not completely formalized about what you do for lenacapavir, but in general, you know, it follows more what the oral regimens looked like, with, you know, maybe 2 in-person visits for your injections, and then at the 3-month mark and the 9-month mark, you discuss if you know, HIV testing should occur, as well as STI testing. Dave, can I ask you what you mean about the 30%
Yeah, so
failure?
you have 10 lenacapavir starts, and 3 of them, I would say, probably were
Oh, no, not failures.
no.
I think they all think they're planning on continuing, so I wouldn't call that
All
failure.
right, but I so once a person who got the ulceration and the leakage, are they safe to go?
So yeah, this is actually my patient, and yeah, as Jill mentioned, he is receiving antibiotics. We think so. The contralateral side actually had no problem, no injection site reaction at all. There is a palpable nodule that you can palpate, but there's nothing visible. And he got the PO loading dose. We think, you know, in many conversations, we think that he probably has enough medication in him. However, because we weren't sure, we decided to bridge him with PO prep until the next 6-month injection.
And what about the people with the leakage? I'm just like, here, I mean, I presume
One got an additional dose. And what I also am not talking about here, because maybe we'll do sort of a review of prep, all the prep modalities at some point and where the guidelines are. But there's actually, it's a little bit complicated for people who are on CYP3, three A medications, and they're actually intended to get additional doses if they're on a medication that could lower the Len dose. So they got another injection. The person who had the significant leakage, one was very minimal leakage, the other one got significant leakage, and they redosed him after discussion with our medical scientist. I want to move, because I think this is where we're sort of heading. What are the best practices for lenacapavir injection? And I really want to thank Dawn Rosenblum for helping me out with this, but this is also conversation with all the nurses that did injection. So, and then I was going to open it up for them to talk about it. These are sort of the best practices that we've found. Is the most important thing is finding the spot with the greatest amount of jiggle, which can be easier for some bodies and harder for other bodies. And I actually tell patients, if they're very fit and lean, this might not be the best medication for them, or they're going to have to anticipate that it may be more difficult. But for some people, they're like, well, if it's difficult twice a year, I don't really care. But I think it's an important conversation to have. Remember, right now, the 2 injection sites that were approved were in the abdomen and in the thigh. But in studies, we are using the upper buttocks and the lower and the arm. And internally, at least, we talked about potentially using off-label sites for patients who really feel like they need it, but obviously documenting that that's a decision that we had. Ice early, 5 to 10 minutes with a good ice pack. Start early, have patients start it before they come in. I had a patient getting lenacapavir for HIV treatment, who, when I arrived, I was like, what's going on your stomach? Because it looked really puffy, and he showed me the large ice pack that he had laying on it to get ready. As an injector, you want to grab a good amount of tissue, about 1.5 inches if you can. Don't squeeze too hard. And again, this is harder with lean individuals, but you have to do your best. You're injecting over 5 to 10 seconds. Once all the Len is in, this is important to prevent leakage. Keep the needle in place and hold the subcutaneous tissue gently for about 2 to 3 seconds. Pull out the needle and release subcutaneous tissue gently. Oh, I already said that twice. I apologize. Really important, so do it twice. And then light pressure for 5 minutes at the site after injection, which should help with the leakage. I see that people are mentioning NSAIDs, Tylenol, Emlicrine. None of these were used. We told people that they could use NSAIDs or Tylenol. It was very haphazard. So I don't think there was anything clear. I think in general, if people find that NSAIDs or Tylenol are useful for them, like when they get injections or when things like that happen, then they should take it. I wouldn't go as far as Emlicrene unless it's someone who's very sensitive. None of that was used in the studies, but of course, as we move into real world, things always change. And I like to make the point, that our 3 injectors have seen probably close to 70 patients for the medication. And, this is twice yearly, whereas, comparing it to the Owen Clinic where we have 12 to 15 injectors for 15 participants. Obviously, the experience is very different within the study sites. And I encourage folks to reach out to our amazing nurses who I was about to highlight on the next page if you have any questions. Does anyone else from the study team want to bring anything up as far as injection goes or anything that they felt like was really helpful for participants? Go ahead, Christian.
Thanks, Jill. I just wanted to say alternative injection sites, you mentioned this, are being studied now. We felt that there was enough experience with all of them, but the FDA wanted a little bit more. So that's back of the arm as well as buttocks. And sometime next year, we'll submit that to FDA to get formal approval. But as you mentioned right now, it's abdomen, which extends all the way out to sort of the love handles area. So I like your comment about finding the most jiggle. And that was directly in response to pregnant women in Purpose One who really wanted things to be out more laterally on the side, as well as upper outer thigh. And then I think you've done a nice job highlighting that injection technique is really critical. The intradermal injection is really something you want to stay away from, whether you're injecting saline or polyethylene glycol or the active drug. So that seems to be associated with some issues.
Thanks, Christian. So I just wanted to acknowledge again, I'll say Herculean efforts of folks from the AVRC. And I really want to thank Steve Hendrick, who I think was extremely supportive of all of these studies and filling in as needed. Incredible study coordinators. I meant to include George Lara Perez, who really got Purpose 2 going, but is, moved on to greener pastures or different pastures, I'll say. Terrence, Lily, Michelle have been just an amazing what they're doing. I think the retention that we have that I can't speak about really has been very successful as a result of their great work. Gabe is our co-investigator on the Purpose studies and filled in for me a few times and has done awesome. Our 3, right. So in addition to Michelle, I thought I missed someone. Don and Stephanie are nurses who've done injections. Dee Dee, Marvin, all amazing. And then our pharmacy staff, Letty, Neve, and Nimish have been great. We partnered for Purpose 4 with Stephanie Strathy's group, La Frontera, to get referrals, which was a great success. And again, we'll be able to talk about that in the future when that study is finished. And Carlos Vera, her study manager, did a great job. And then Cherie Jones gave me a bunch of these slides, so thank you so much, and Robert for talking about his study. And this is what I've been really busy with, trying to make these 2 little people functional adults, which I'm really working on right now. I'm just kidding. Anyway, I realize it's close to 9 o'clock, which is never what I want to do, but I'm happy to take. Oh, and Darcy's there. Thank you, Connie. I didn't stream through the whole thing. Here, let me stop sharing so I can see everyone. There she is. Oh, my sweetheart. Thank you so much. And it's nice to see Francesca as well, who I had a weird dream about. I'll tell you that later. And thank you. I can see Adam's face. So, sorry that I went a little bit over. I hope this went well. Anyone have any questions? Oh my God, I meant Cherie Grams. I don't know. Oh, I mixed 2 names. Thank you so much, Carla. That's embarrassing for me. I'm gonna change that very quickly. Well, anyway, I think that, let us know. Oh, and thank you, Lily. Yes, our lab staff is incredible. tried to do the best I could. Anyway, everyone was amazing. Thank you so much. If folks are interested in Purpose 365, definitely let myself or Marvin know. And I'm happy to take questions via email if we didn't get to them, because I want to let you go back to your days.
Jill?
Oh, Steve, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I just was giving everyone else for my team an opportunity. But the one thing I wanted to mention that was different for the sub-Q injections is that it's not at a 45, it's at a 90. So just to really get it as deep as possible, with in addition with the ice. So I think between those two changes from what's a standard sub-Q injection, it really makes a huge difference.
And what I had wanted to do, but obviously failed and with my timing, was to ask other places if they had started using Lenacapavir for HIV prevention. I don't know if anyone's still still there that can share that. Otherwise, we definitely will have more conversations about the PrEP landscape over the next few months, and probably a follow-up high rounds. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Cherie, I'm so sorry, Cherie. I don't know what happened in my brain. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks so much for joining.